All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to day number 25. So for 25 days here, I've been coming into my studio making art during the weekdays. I have been live streaming. I really am live streaming. It kind of keeps me accountable. It makes me show up, especially during the weekdays, and then it's carried over to the weekends. And so, I really just wanted to share, just to kind of encourage people to come out and make art, and without that notion that, like, oh, I'm going to teach something. It's not really about that. It's just about me sharing my process, and then if you can get something out of that, awesome. If you're just tuning in and doing your own thing, that's awesome too. There's no that's the beauty of this. This wasn't about showing up and doing what I'm doing. So, day 25 means that after today, there's only 5 days left, and I'm pretty excited that I've been able to keep going and doing this. And I mentioned there yesterday and maybe in a previous live stream that I'm going to continue into October, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do monsters. And so I don't know yet if I'm going to live stream it, but we'll see. I kind of enjoy the live stream, but on the same hand, it's kind of like, it's a commitment to be here every day at 4 o'clock, get everything ready, set it up, get going. And then, of course, the internet has issues and all this other stuff. Like today, right before I got on, it was like I went to go live and then it just wasn't working. And so I had to stop and restart and do everything. So anyway, so today, day number 25, I've been really kind of discovering some really, discovering some things about my own art, discovering some things about me that are really interesting. Here for the longest time, I can't really put a time limit on it. It's been kind of so long. I've been feeling very stagnant in my art. Like, even though I've been making a lot of art over the last couple years, I haven't really felt like it's been gelling. It's been like something that I've been excited about. And so when I look back at some of that art, it feels very, very stagnant. It feels very kind of not me. And I feel like coming here every day this month has really helped me figure some things out. And so I've kind of talked about that before, but it's that notion of there are ideas and things and techniques and processes and images that show up, keep coming up again and again in my artwork, that I feel like, okay, I need to pay attention to those and then figure out, like, okay, what does this mean to me and why am I drawn to it? So today I don't really have much of a plan. Earlier in the day, I did a time-lapse video of a large 2-page journal spread using a lot of the ideas that I've explored over the years, and I shared that on social media, so it's out there on this Facebook page as well as my Instagram page. And so I don't know if I'll continue with that or just kind of end up doing something else. So I'm just going to dive in, and if you want to create along, remember, you don't have to do what I'm doing. You can work on anything that you want to. But if you're tuning in and you want to say hi, it's always great to see who's out there and where you're tuning in from. So if you want to pop into the comments and say hi, or if you have any questions or any comments, of course, that's a great place to put all those. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let me switch over. And so, again, I've got my 4-inch by 4-inch square. That's a really great size to work with. I'm using my Inktense paints. It's basically the same stuff as my Inktense pencils, but just in paint form. And I don't know, I look at the colors and I kind of think, like, okay, what haven't I used much of? And I'm gonna do something really different. I'm gonna grab this. This is a sepia brown, and so it's a really dark brown. I think that's it, or maybe it's a gray, a Payne's gray. I can never keep all these colors kind of straight. But because it's a very dark color to begin with, I don't want it to be super dark, because then it's really hard to kind of build up the layers. What would that look like if I put a little bit of this turquoise blue in it? So that paint was really wet, and when I splattered it, it starts to kind of bleed and fade and blend into it. Hit it with a hairdryer and see what happens. Alright, that turquoise kind of fade a little bit more, so I have kind of splotches of color, which is kind of neat. I think I'm going to return to this sea blue. So you can tell I use this pencil quite a bit. Just trying to think. I'll probably end up doing some squares, but trying to think like maybe I'll change it up. Maybe I'll do different sides. It's been really interesting working on the square paper. I haven't done a lot on square paper, well, I've done more paintings, like acrylic paintings, on square canvases and square panels. But not a lot of this kind of work using the watercolor and the Inktense materials. And so it's really interesting because it's such a confined space. When I do a journal spread, that's 2 big pages, but the square is really, it's kind of a tight fit there. So kind of thinking about the balance in the design is always an interesting challenge. So I usually kind of set the tone of my piece early on with the choice of color, but then also thinking about like the background and using the different shapes, kind of thinking about the structure. That all just kind of sets the rest of it. So it was kind of interesting just to grab that brown or that sepia or that gray, whatever color that was, and use that first, because I haven't used it much. So it just kind of pushes me in maybe a direction that I hadn't thought of. And then just to kind of use that turquoise blue on top of it, again, it was just sort of like a spontaneous thought, and it was like, okay, cool. So just looking in the comments, and we've got, we've got, I'm going to assume you pronounce it Hannah or Hanny from Norway. So that's awesome. I know it's kind of late there, and we've got Bonnie from Detroit. So thank you so much for tuning in. So again, if you're just tuning in and you want to pop into the comments and say hi, it's always great to kind of see that. All right, I think grab some collage maybe. Kind of cleaned up my table a little bit. Let's go ahead and grab. I haven't used this too much. You might not be able to tell, but this printing on the inside of the security envelope is blue. It's kind of a bluish ink. I've really been using this technique a lot where I cut the strips of collage and just use it more as an element, kind of thinking of it as a line. Really gotten into using circles. I mean, I've always kind of used circles, but I've been using a lot of maps and kind of cutting out. I thought today, well, I got this text from a book, and a lot of times I'll use a template, but I kind of feel like, well, I drew the squares freehand, might as well do the circle freehand too. It's not really important to me like what the text is. I just like the color of it, and it's kind of that yellowish, kind of old paper color, and then it's just that text creates a interesting texture. I'm going to hit the collage with the hair dryer. I just find that with the glue stick, I mean, I love the glue stick. I use the Uhu glue stick, and some people really hate glue stick, but I that's pretty much all I use. But I do find that if I paint over it immediately after I glue it down, that it can peel up much easier. So if I hit it with the hair dryer, it just kind of dries it. Makes it less likely to kind of lift off if I paint over it. Alright, I think I'm done with the collage for now. I might come back later. But I want to bring that circle out. Right now it really kind of blends into the background, so I'm going to go in. I think I'll just grab my violet, my purple, and blue and purple is always a good fit. So as I was doing that, I just had a thought. Again, this is just kind of like that intuition, kind of listening to that little voice that's kind of in your head. And I thought, well, usually I just dip my brush in the water and paint with the Inktense pencils. But I have this magenta, this fuchsia color. And so if I get that on my brush and then paint into the purple, it changes. But I do want to rinse out my brush before I get more of it. So I get this nice color blend of the fuchsia into the purple. I'm going to try to be careful and go around these squares. So again, I rinse out my brush because it's picked up that that purple pencil. And so I don't want to contaminate that fuchsia, that magenta color. So that choice right there, it was just more of a spontaneous thought, and it totally changes the feeling of the piece. All right, had another spontaneous thought. So here lately, I've been doing a lot of like organic tree-like forms. A lot of people say they look like trees, um, and I thought about doing that, but then I thought, well, I got this big circle, and then what if I took this is that sea blue pencil, so it's the same pencil I used back here. I think what if I just did some lines, some kind of curving organic lines. And I think I'll stop when I get to those squares. And so by doing that, by making it look like the squares are overlapping the lines, then those squares all of a sudden jump to the front. But what's really interesting is that, well, it's, they're actually, that's the background. And so it's like I've left that light with the background color, so then it starts to create this really interesting push and pull when you play around with like what's in front of other things. So I'm using very similar organic lines that I have like for those tree-like, organic, rock-like, whatever you want to call them, forms. But I'm just making them radiate out from that circle. I'm just grabbing a pointed brush, and then that way I can kind of paint along the lines. I'm not trying to stay perfectly on them, but I just find that sometimes it's nice just to spread that Inktense pencil with a little bit of water and use the thin pointed brush just in a line, and then I'll go back and I'll spread it a little bit more after I kind of hit all the lines. But I'm not trying to stay perfectly on the lines with the brush. I'm just trying to get a little bit of water down to activate the pigment. And so what that does, it kind of allows some of that pigment to set up, to dry a little bit. And it just, the lines will stay. Oftentimes with the Inktense, when you paint over them and you just kind of start scrubbing away, and the lines will really blend away. And that's, I like that sometimes. Other times I want the lines to stay a little bit stronger. And that's one way to kind of do it. So yeah, using that that magenta, that fuchsia color, and the purple, and now the blue, really, these three and the circle really kind of pop out. I really like that. Not really sure. I think I'm gonna grab my blue pen. We'll see. So the ink in these pens are pretty transparent, so sometimes they don't show up super well on top of darker backgrounds. But it's a very similar blue to what's down there. And so by going back over top of the lines, I can get a nice crisp line kind of inside, and then I'll add a few other kind of thinner lines, kind of more detailed lines. So these lines are very organic. Very curvy. They remind me of leaves and grass. But by using the blue, that kind of changes it. While I'm at it, I'm going to bring some of this blue around these squares. So that's just going to kind of even out the edges and bring a little bit more contrast to the squares. And then I'm going to shade it. Just going to kind of use some lines to help fade it into the background more. So I'm constantly turning my paper. I mean, this is small paper, but even with larger paper and canvases and such, I always turn them. And I'm always surprised at how there are a lot of people that don't do that. And especially I was a public school art teacher for 20 years. And it's amazing how many people are like, this is the way it's supposed to be, so I have to work on it that way. And it's like, well, why? Turn it. I mean, to me, it seems like a very obvious thing, but I wonder why it's not so obvious to others. with these lines going around, it's very flower-like now. Something that I had not intended to do. That's alright. I like the contrast between the geometric shapes and the organic lines. So I'm just going back and I'm thickening up some of the lines that close to the circle. Not all of them, but just a few. So I grabbed a black pen. This is a thicker one. Allows me to do really thick, bold lines pretty quickly. So I'm adding these additional lines around, and on an earlier day, I don't know exactly when, but I used something similar. It's a kind of imagery that I developed years ago, and it's really about connection and about how these different lines kind of connect and come together and kind of create this complex form. So I just kind of felt like I wanted the circle to be part of this kind of connection imagery. And so then it kind of does double duty. It becomes part of this black line and shape imagery, but then it's also the center of that flower-like image. And again, kind of thinking about the push and the pull. was thinking about this circle, and I'm like, okay, I want it to be painted in, and I want these squares to be painted in. And my first thought was like, oh, I can do yellow. I've done yellow on some other days in similar circumstances. But then I thought like, okay, that's just too cliche of a flower. You know, the colorful petals and then the yellow center. But this now kind of makes everything really dark. So I'm going to bring back some more contrast in a different way. Just trim off a little bit of this around the edge. So I want to bring some white back into it. And I could do that a number of ways, but an easy way is to use a gel pen. And so this is a Uniball Signo pen, and it's a favorite of a lot of folks. It's a very opaque pen. I do find that sometimes it doesn't work super well, especially if it's kind of older. Sometimes it can get kind of streaky. So I find that I have to kind of go over it a couple times. part of me doesn't want to overdo the white. Just going to go back to my black pen. I'm not liking how the squares just seem different, so I'm just going to put a black outline around them. And I'm thinking that will help it tie into the design a little bit more. Okay, I'm really starting to feel like this is done. I don't want to overdo it. Maybe I've already overdone it, but yeah, I think I'm going to call it done and sign it. So yeah, I just sometimes I use up the whole hour, sometimes I don't. Um, yeah, this one turned out very different. I mean, it uses a lot of the same elements, a lot of the same things that I've used in my other pieces, and I really just kind of let my intuition take over with it, and uh, you know, and just when I had a thought like, oh, do I want to do that? Oh, what if I did this? What if I tried that? So I like Crystal Neubauer. I mentioned this yesterday. Crystal Neubauer talks about that intuitive voice, or like kind of thinking intuitively. It's not about not thinking. It's about thinking minimally. It's like not overthinking it. And so like when you hear like, oh, I could do this, and that's like a little voice in my head that I like hear whenever I'm working. It's like, oh, I could use blue there. Oh, I could put a line there. Oh, I need more contrast. And it's just like a little voice that just pops up, and it's I don't have it pre-planned, so I just sort of let that voice kind of guide me. And sometimes I go, oh, yeah, no, that's not a good idea. So yeah, it's yeah, I'm just kind of sitting here looking at it, and yeah, it's different, but not too different from other things. So, as artists, we explore, we experiment, we try out different things, and kind of see kind of where it goes. But yeah, so that kind of wraps it up for day number 25. So if you were making something along with me and you want to post it, you can always tag me in social media, or what a lot of people do is post it in the comments. If you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, feel free to post those in the comments as well. So, yeah, can't believe it's already day number 25. So, let me just check the comments again. All right. So, yeah. Anyway, so thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll definitely be back on Monday. I won't be here tomorrow because of teaching a class, but I will make, and I'll post that. And same thing on Sunday. If I don't get a chance to live stream, I'll at least make something and post it so that you can see it. And then I'll be back here to live stream on Monday for the last 3 days. So anyway, thank you so much, and yeah, I'll see you on, at least on Monday.